everyone, welcome back to another episode of Project Civic Si, proudly sponsored by the First National Bank of me. In today's episode, we continue the search for more power for my K20Z3 engine with the installation of this, a full 3-inch exhaust. Let's get to it. So in the last episode, I installed Honda Flash Pro onto the car and was enjoying the benefits of that on an otherwise stock car. However, I alluded to the fact that I was buying bolt-ons for this car, and this is the first step. It is an OG Go Power Motorsports exhaust setup, somewhat uncommon for these cars, very cool. The guy sold it to me for a very reasonable price, which made hopping on it a no-brainer. He threw in the adapter, whether I want to run the stock cat or eventually a header. There's the adapter there. Full 3-inch piping goes to a muffler right here, 2 45-degree bends into a straight through resonator, and back here into the rear muffler with a polished 4-inch exhaust tip. First, we have to remove the stock exhaust off the Civic, and it looks pretty straightforward. If you look way up there, there's a catalytic converter with a 3-bolt flange on it. And you follow it back, this is the actual cat back you're looking at now. Basically a welded-in resonator there, very thin profile, goes to the flange right there. And again, 2 45-degree bends into this resonator right here. There are 2 spring bolts right here, which go to the rear muffler, which just has a hanger up here. Looks like flathead, 12 and a 14 should be all we need. All right, get your muffler off. So with the rear muffler out of the car, it's time to go tackle the 3 fasteners that hold the cat to the rest of the exhaust. All right, fingers crossed. Whoop. We get it? Hey! That's why you pay more for California cars, kid. No rust. Okay, so I have the stock exhaust off the car and I have it laid next to the Go Power full 3-inch exhaust. And an important aspect of this build that I may not have spoken up on quite as much is the fact that I've been trying to be very mindful of the weight of this car, because the 8th Gen Civic is just kind of a heavy car for a Honda. You know, it weighs almost 3,000 pounds stock. So with the aftermarket parts I put on this car, I have been pretty mindful about keeping the weight down, like with the Stop Type BBK and the lightweight wheels, trying to keep that weight in check. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to an exhaust, the stock exhaust is just so much smaller in diameter in terms of aftermarket one. It's kind of hard to really save weight there, especially because the stock SI exhaust is actually very, very light. I went ahead and weighed the various components of this exhaust. You know, the stock exhaust is just the rear muffler and an integrated mid-pipe. The aftermarket exhaust is the mid-pipe, the resonator, and then the muffler. But the long and short of it is that the stock SI exhaust weighs 25 pounds in total, and this full 3-inch aftermarket exhaust does weigh 36 pounds in total. So it's a weight gain of 11 pounds. Now, an interesting thing to note is that Honda's very good about frequency tuning, which is why, in this case, for this engine, they've used 1 muffler and 1 resonator, kind of a large cylinder and a small one. And that's an important acoustic thing you'll find when making exhausts for this platform. Interestingly, this Go Power exhaust utilizes 2 mufflers and a mid resonator. Now, if this setup is very, very quiet for a 3-inch exhaust, I might go ahead and remove this muffler and just straight pipe this section to save a few pounds, but that we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, let's get this exhaust put on the car. Well, surprise! size, the exhaust does not fit. Unfortunately, I figured this was a possibility of happening, but the aftermarket exhaust, being 3 inches in diameter, is so much larger than the stock exhaust. It doesn't actually bolt up to the stock cat. Because the stock exhaust is so much smaller in diameter, the studs that come out of the cat are much closer together, and thus it is impossible to bolt the flange of the larger exhaust up to the stock cat, which means that I either have to buy an aftermarket high flow cat or install a long tube header. So I was hoping to do this in a separate episode, but I guess I have no choice. How else about this? This is a Skunk2 Alpha long tube header, commonly believed to be kind of one of the best budget-friendly options for this platform to make a good amount of power. So I also picked this up as well for a reasonable price, and so I guess I'm also installing this. Oh boy, 2 for 1 episode. Okay, so I am back and I have installed the Skunk2 header along with the Go Power 3-inch exhaust, and wow, what an ordeal to do. Now, if you have a lift, this would not be that hard, but on jack stands, getting the stock manifold out and installing the Skunk2 long tube header is awful. It is super not fun. Mercifully, this is a California car and it has no rust, which is one less factor to work with. If this is an East Coast car and had a bunch of rust on it, I would just throw the whole car away and not even try and deal with it, or take it to a shop and pay them a lot of money. I changed the base map on my Honda Flash Pro to one that does accommodate for a race header. It's not a perfect match because it's meant for an intake as well, and I don't have an intake yet, but we'll work on that in a future episode, obviously. But yeah, let's go for a drive so you can hear how the setup sounds with a stock intake, a Skunk2 header, and the Go Power full 3-inch exhaust. It is very, very loud. So I try to figure out a place where I can bring the Civic Si and kind of just get on it at different gears, different RPMs, so you kind of hear how the setup sounds. And so I'm here at Angeles Crest, and I figured let's spend a few minutes going up and down the mountain. Now, it's the weekend, so there's going to be a ton of traffic, so I can't go super duper fast. But I figured I'll come here and kind of let you guys get a feel for it. RPMs, which in this case appears to be under 4,000, there is an immense amount of drone in the cabin. So right now I'm in 4th gear at 3,000 RPM, and it's just, there's a lot of drone in this cabin. Cruising on the freeway here, you know, 3,000 RPM in 6th gear is about 70 miles an hour. It is honestly unbearable. I'm very tolerant of loud cars. I love a loud car, but the drone this thing produces from about 2,700 RPM to 3,700 RPM is honestly out of control. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion as to what the problem is. One, drone is a result of frequency tuning. So this setup is a header with a 3-inch exhaust. It has a resonator, and a muffler. Now, my suspicion is that that setup is kind of incorrectly spec'd and is actually increasing the drone. A lot of the racers I follow who run these cars tend to run, a small resonator, a small round resonator, and an oval or square-shaped muffler. And that sort of sound tuning seems to work for them, or at least make it passable. Now, unfortunately, this thing makes a beautiful noise when it's stock. Once you modify them, K20s are not a nice-sounding engine. It's not as charming, say, as a B series. resonator in the mid-pipe was actually hitting part of the chassis. And so I was able to hammer that part of the chassis to sufficiently clear it, at least when the car was sitting. However, as you rev the engine moves around, the exhaust moves around. It's entirely possible that resonator is still rubbing against the chassis. And that would explain why it is louder in here than it is from the actual exhaust itself. The actual exhaust noise, you know, if I just blew past you, it's loud. It's not that crazy though. In the cabin, this is insane. This is completely unacceptable for, you know, this is not a daily driver. This is a car, the only street miles I really drive it is to and from the track, but this is just unacceptable. Even just driving here gave me a headache. Equally imperative, or equally important I should say, is the fact that when I looked in that resonator, it was completely hollow. There was nothing left in there. You know, there was no baffles or sound packing or anything. And so I bought this exhaust used. I don't know how many miles are on it. It's entirely possible that resonator has completely blown out. And the problem is, that resonator, once it blows out, just becomes an echo chamber. And that could explain why the buzzing, particularly in this area, is so brutal. Once you get over about 4,000, the sound actually mellows out. Though there is a rattling sound, that might again be that mid-resonator rubbing against the chassis. I thought I cleared it, but maybe not enough. It's funny, once you get over 4,000, the sound actually mellows. It becomes quieter, which is the exact opposite of what anyone in their right mind wants. Because this thing, you know, driving around town and on a cold start is very annoying, if I'm frank. And when you get on it, you think it sounds better, but it really doesn't, which is sad. I'm really curious if I've blown out the mic, you know. As per usual, I have the exhaust mic'd up, just like I do in the track videos. Let's see if I can pass this dickhead. I'm all ears. Whether it's a different kind of resonator